It has been a wild and crazy week. Goodness gracious, my friends. The Scarlet Fever, I think we actually infected just about everybody. We definitely infected the Pokemon community. We definitely infected the leakers, and we convinced them that it's time to just unload. Nintendo did not drop a trailer as we thought, but they might as well have dropped three trailers because that's how much information we have received this week. So, welcome to Scarlet Fever, episode 7. And before we get any further, they couldn't leak this. We're the only ones that have the true cartridges for Pokemon Scarlet and Violet. Remember, these are giveaway items. This is the last week for the giveaway. There's a link in the description below, or if you're on audio, you're on YouTube, you're on iTunes, leave us a review, please. Leave us a review, and then let us know that you left a review, and you can pick whether you want Pokemon Scarlet with Lechonk or Pokemon Violet with Lechonk. The two motorcycle guys don't matter. This is what the real title cover box Pokemon are. And yeah, we super appreciate your support, super appreciate your reviews, and somebody is gonna make Joseph really jealous with a little Lechonk for their house. Man,
So it's okay as long as it exists. I think the world's better for it.
there
Can't be
has
mad at it.
there has been so much this week. I don't even really know where to begin. Like, we started this podcast off and we were like, okay, well, some weeks might be really hard. Like Joseph, I hope you're ready for this because some weeks you might have to dress up like a Pokemon. You might have to come up with a Q&A. I don't know. And man, oh man, Riddler Coup and the new leaker have just given us bounties. We basically know the game, and I guess like does how do you feel about that? How do you feel about? I think more so than maybe any other Pokemon. This is just all out there before Nintendo's really shown Game Freak has shown any of it.
Yeah. It's kind of a bittersweet thing, especially watching Riddler 2 as we started the podcast. He's really been trying to maintain like a fun way to leak everything out while also not leaving us high and dry because Nintendo and the Pokemon company seem to not really um, be giving us too much to go off of. But these leaks, while they're definitely entertaining and they're awesome to see, I can see that for some people it can possibly ruin the experience, or it's always kind of sad when information gets out before a team can officially do it. But at the
Yeah,
same time, everything that's leaked so far is interesting enough on its own, right? Like I almost feel like with prior Pokemon games, the game itself leaking ahead of time wouldn't have really changed too much
hmm.
in terms of like the general hype of a Pokemon game. This seems to be adding to it, which is probably the strangest part about it, right? Like
Yeah,
all this information getting thrown at us, and we've kind of just accepted it's all true, right? Like I mean, I guess at this point it's hard not to think it is. We see screenshots. We have multiple people saying the same things that date months ago, so
right.
it's kind of exciting. It kind of almost feels like it's just the information rolling out anyway, so
Yeah.
I mean, it's not like we know too much.
Is it though? I feel like I don't know what they could possibly be hiding. I mean, I feel like we know three different gimmicks and well, before we get anywhere, what's your favorite? Like, pick like one thing that's your favorite from all the leaks for this week. Like, what's one small thing that just really tickled you?
Mhm. I That's tough, honestly. It's really all so good. My favorite of the league so far have to be the gym leaders.
Mm,
I just think they're such a cool lineup, and it's hard for me not to be excited about new Pokemon like characters. But if we're talking of like the actual, I guess, gimmicks and stuff along those lines, I'm really interested in these R fake or like convergent evolutions.
yeah,
Um, because the idea of it just sounds so out of left field, and it doesn't make sense in terms of what we know about the game so far,
yeah,
because this isn't the like prehistoric or futuristic thing. This is like Pokemon that have evolved separately, like from the same ancestor. It's very like Darwinism esque So
Yeah.
I don't know. I'm real that's probably my most hype thing. What
For
about you?
for me, it's just that Primeape is getting an evolution. That
Yeah.
sounds great. I'm really all about that. I love when they take like the OG Gen 1 cast and give them something new. Maybe some people are against it and
Mhm.
think it's, messing with God's perfect creation, but I love that just because that's when I was so into Pokemon. Like that was my number one era. I was 7 years old when they first came
Yeah.
out, Red and Blue, and I just there was just so much hype of back then I would get the packs of cards and I would see new characters that I didn't know because I didn't have the internet back then, so it wasn't like I go look up the
Yeah.
Pokedex. So like that was just such a joyful time in my life, and Primeape's a really cool guy. I remember Ash's Primeape back in the OG. Didn't he have a Primeape back in the
Um,
season?
I think he did have one. It was the one who kept stealing his hat. I think it
Yes,
was like
yeah, he was really
he was like kind of
mischievous.
an enemy at
Yeah,
first, and then he ends up being a friend. Yeah,
yeah. So
great Pokemon, honestly.
I'm down for that. I do think the gym leaders are fun, and we got a leak that supposedly we were right. That girl is a streamer. That's her other job. So
Hmm.
VTuber is pretty right on the money, and it was looking like we were really wrong last episode. We were talking like, man, maybe we just don't get this game. But I think this week kind of confirmed that we have been on the money with sort of what I feel will be like the advertised game. Like I think the prehistoric and future forms will kind of be. I think it's hard to advertise the convergent forms, and we'll talk about sort of the clone Pokemon,
Hmm.
but and I don't know what you think about the crystallization. That's sort of still kind of not super clear. But I feel like this is what they're gonna hype is like Professor Sada has like found these prehistoric Pokemon, and Professor Turo has found these futuristic Pokemon. I feel like that will be sort of the crux of what they show.
For sure. I mean, I think that's why all the leaks coming at once is like really it's hard to process, and it really messed us up as you said last week in the podcast because we were like, oh, there's no way this all fits together.
Right?
But
How?
it seemingly does. It
Right?
seems as if not only were we thinking about the prehistoric and futuristic, but we are still getting regional forms, and then we are getting the convergent evolutions, which
Right?
are brand new to the series and don't necessarily have to do with the theming of the game. And I think that's important because this is setting a precedent that we haven't seen since regional forms. So, you know, Alola was the last time we saw them take Pokemon and go, let's reimagine.
Mm-hmm.
And it kind of set up a great thing. It future proofed the series because now any Pokemon could potentially come back with a new redesign, a new, kind of a new vigor. Um, but with the convergent evolutions now, we have that again, but
Mm-hmm.
they're not boxed in to make it the same Pokemon. So, I think that like while it's not a marketable like gimmick, because I think you kind of have to already have a lot of knowledge on Pokemon to even like understand what they're trying to do. Because I imagine from someone on the outside looking in an R Fate and a regional form are probably looking very similar, right?
Yeah.
Like, what's the difference if Diglett has hair to it being a bunch of water worms coming out. Like
Yeah.
it's the same Pokemon, in concept. So I think like that's really what's going to be the interesting thing is seeing this new concept kind of come to life because this is the only thing that we haven't really seen yet. We hear everybody talking about it. Everyone who's in the know mentions it and has been mentioning it again for months. But I think until we see the first R Fate, we genuinely don't know.
Yeah.
Like, is it a recolor? Is it a new model altogether? We do know that they are separate in the Pokedex, which is extremely interesting. And I think some people, have been having kind of a negative reaction to that, where they're
Mm-hmm.
like, they'll say things along the lines of like, "This is a waste of a death spot,"
Right.
which I get the sentiment of it, right? Like if Meowth was in a generation twice, right? I guess it would feel a little cheated. You'd feel a little cheated, but at the same time, we don't know how different the Pokemon are, right?
Yeah.
So they could very much be just completely different Pokemon that have similarities to other ones. Like, nobody complains about how many different types of birds there are in real life, but that's kind of the idea, right? They stem from
I
the
don't know.
same
I
ancestor.
complain. There's too many birds. I don't even know what they
Too
are.
many. You see now?
At least
there
with
goes my
Pokemon,
whole.
you're like, okay, there's a Pidgey, there's a Fearow, like you understand what's going on. I
Yeah.
think for these regional fakes and for these conversion types, which if you haven't been following along, basically are like clone Pokemon. So the example we have right now is like, what if Diglett looked like Diglett, but it was actually water eels that were kind of like approximating Diglett, and they
Mhm.
really look like Diglett, but they're not Diglett and they're water type. And I think for me, like the element of this that I'm most interested in is the story implication. And that sounds kind of goofy because I'm not the big Pokemon story guy, but I feel like there's a chance that this connects things in a way that either really upsets people or is super cool. And I want to bring something on screen right now. Since we're live, we're trying this live thing out here. We can do this kind of cool. But check this out. And if you're not watching, if you're listening, I will try to explain this to you. But so this screen here, and Joseph, I'm going to send it to you so that you
Mhm.
can see it as well. But basically, what we have going on here is this idea that maybe these are fakes tie species together and tie them together in this really weird way where potentially Bulbasaur, Mudkip, Wooper, Poliwag all evolve Darwin evolution style
Yeah.
from the same origin point. And if that is the case, where we see like, oh my gosh, there's this initial eel that turns into Diglett and also turns into this eel thing, like that would have reverberations through the entire Pokemon ecosystem that I think could really mess some people up. Like if you found out that all of a sudden, like, holy crap, Bulbasaur and Lotad are related, like,
Yeah. You know what? That's it. This chart actually just made me kind of understand possibly where they're coming from with this whole edition. When you look at like Pokemon in general, it's always like, oh, they evolve and that's kind of it, right? They genetically modify when they hit a certain level, or when
right,
they do, in the course of the anime, it's like really like when they're ready to. But it's not it's like a hard change, right? It's not evolution like how we know it in the real world, or even what this uh, graph is really saying. So what's interesting now is like the implication that I'm getting from this kind of being the idea behind it, which I do believe it sounds like, right? Like Pokemon that are different that stem from the same ancestor. So I think this is actually like the perfect example. Um, this is kind of like what I imagine Pokemon were probably evolving like before human interference,
mm-hmm,
right? Like it was more of a natural thing. So what if that does play into the story? What if this natural evolution is brought up as, we talked about Black and White last week and how it hit kind of darker tones in terms of like the storytelling. What if it really is like we hit that similar concept of, did we make Pokemon kind of like halt their evolutionary
yeah,
like course by training them and battling with them, or like that's kind of where I'm going with that. Like that's my just like out there guess is, what if Pokemon were like normal animals and they did evolve naturally over generations and generations, and we do have them as they are now, but once we started interfering with them, and using them for like battling or other things, we kind of gave them that new outlet of evolution, right? Like that's kind of where I'm at, which would set up a good kind of story thread of like, do we do things the way they used to be, the prehistoric way, or are we moving towards the future where now we're also apparently like modifying Pokemon? Because again, we do have those like futuristic Pokemon now.
right,
So it's just interesting that this does kind of play into a past, right? It's not just like copycat Pokemon. Um, it does seem like, again, they're really going for this generational thing, which is really cool and a way to connect Pokemon that I think nobody ever has.
Yeah, it would be like a nature versus nurture type conflict, and I could see even like the prehistoric forms and the future forms tying in. So Scarlet is all about letting things happen as they naturally do. Look at how the Pokemon were back in the day. We have prehistoric Jigglypuff or Wigglytuff, and so exciting. And then Violet is like, no, no, but we've made the Pokemon better. We've made them stronger. We've made them whatever. And
exactly.
and it's interesting that the distinction between prehistoric and like these are fake convergent species is also interesting because to me you could kind of group them together but they're not, and so I'm curious how that all factors in of like how does the game establish, okay, this is a convergent species or something and this is a prehistoric species, you know what I mean? Like how do they, because I feel
Yeah.
like on the surface you could be like, oh, these are one and the same but they're not, and so I don't know. This game could have a really interesting story and one that, if it does follow kind of this chart, like you were saying, like I think would change sort of the discourse for Pokemon forever. Because you'd look back and people could be like, well, even though this region didn't cover it, are these related? These guys kind of look similar. Did they start from the same, origin based species? And I don't know. I think that would be. Would that bother you to know that like all these Pokemon are related?
I don't think it bothered me too much. There, Pokemon has some weird lore, man. I
Yeah.
mean, in one of the games, it talks about how in the past Pokemon and humans used to marry each other. So
Ooh.
we're not, we're not in the place to really be like this is going to be lore changing because there have been so many times that we've seen something be said in Pokemon that's like really out of pocket, and we're just
Yeah.
like, yeah, that makes sense. Um, you know, what's really cool is again, like I actually whoever made this chart, wherever you got this from, this is like seriously getting the brain turning because now I'm thinking, you know, what if like because again, I think the major thing is how does all this connect,
Mhm.
right? Like that's kind of what we're left thinking until we see it in action, see it in context, and kind of understand stuff like that. But I'm starting to again, use context clues, trying to figure out anything that I can to make sense of it all. And kind of where I'm at right now personally is what if so again, if we're referencing that graph that you kind of put up with the Pokemon, right? Let's say that ancient Mudkip and ancient Wooper, for instance, represent current Pokemon, right? So, for instance, we'll do like Diglett
Mhm.
in terms of what we know so far. So, Diglett will be kind of in the middle. What if in Pokemon Scarlet and Violet there are, we'll say rifts, we'll say things like something dimensional that is opening in this region that is leaking into our dimension or our time, right? And so we're able to see Pokemon how they looked, you
Mm.
know, prehistorically, or some how they look in the future, right? The way I can see the R fates playing into it is what if the again, like the art fake is introduced because we get to see a prehistoric version of Pokemon now, right? So the idea of our fates being related to Pokemon that already exist never really had any ground in the past because we didn't know that Pokemon even
Mm.
stemmed from the same, from the same I guess, original creature, right? But
Yeah.
now that we have access to see Pokemon in the past and the future, they can really play with that. We can see maybe a prehistoric Diglett, and then we can see how it transformed into
That's
these
a
two
really
separate things.
cool theory. That would be really
You get what I'm
nifty, and
saying?
you
Like,
could
what
you
if?
you could get little almost like this graph shows it well, but you could have like, okay, so back in the day, Bulbasaur's prehistoric form did have the little coral antennae thing
Mhm.
from Wooper, so you can see like, oh, they were like species brethren. That would be really nifty.
Exactly, and it all ties the time thing together because it's like we had no way to see that. There's no
Yeah.
way to really kind of have that. I mean, it will be also the implications are interesting because um now that we have the Legend series, they can potentially really expand on this idea of Pokemon coming from a
Oh, that's a good point.
a single ancestor. Because let's say we did a Legends, I don't know, like
Zubat.
Legends. Zubat, right? So we'd be in the Kanto region, and we can potentially see a version of Bulbasaur that looks closer to Mudkip,
Yeah.
right? Like you said, has the antennas, and they don't necessarily have to be like, oh look, it's a common ancestor. They can just use the same design motifs to kind
Hmm.
of give it that idea.
They
Kind of
could
going back to
even
the
call
Diglett
it
thing,
Bulbasaur in that like world.
exactly, because as they know it, that is Bulbasaur, right?
Now that's
Which would
sweet.
make that would make absolute sense why it's a different Pokemon entry,
Yeah.
right? Because it is technically different. You know, it what it does is different. How it operates, like who knows? Maybe the antennas, like that Bulbasaur could be water grass,
Hmm.
so it can't be the same Pokemon Dex entry because what if this one stays, in lakes
Hmm.
and that's where it is all the time? So I think what this is actually doing is it's another way to future proof the series
Yeah.
where later on they're not being like boxed in, they're not locking themselves into these Pokemon. They now somehow found a way to make new Pokemon while iterating off of old ones and it not being regional differences. Like now we have basically time differences. It's
Hmm.
it's it's essentially like really opening the world, which is why I'm thinking like this has to be like a major gimmick in Scarlet and Violet, where there has to be some way that time is like blending, right? Like the future and the past and the present, they're mixing, and it has to be part of the story. I can't imagine that this isn't like, hey, there are time rifts opening in this region. We need to shut them down.
Well,
Like
because
that being the kind of overarching thing.
the leaks have said that the Pokemon time travel, but the player character doesn't. So yeah,
Yeah,
so Pokemon are maybe it's going to be something where like, oh, we've messed with them too much, and so now they're phasing in and out. They don't even know where they are or what's happening, or something of that
yeah,
sort.
exactly.
I
I
think,
mean, I could even imagine it in Pokemon Legends Arceus, right? There's the what are those called? Like the rifts, right? That
yeah,
that happen sometimes,
yeah,
and those are like literally dimensional rifts. Like Porygon, for instance, could appear in it, which makes no sense because Porygon is a man-made Pokemon.
right.
Like it was essentially science that created it. So it bleeding into Legends Arceus,
That's a really
I
good
mean,
idea.
this could be like real story implications on they might even I mean, I heard a rumor that some Legends Arceus Pokemon are actually going to be in this game, like some of the prehistoric versions of Pokemon. And I think with uh who on Twitter showing that picture of Teddy Ursa, and we just got Ursa Luna in Legends Arceus, I could very much see that Pokemon being in the game
Yeah.
due to these time rifts, which makes complete sense. And it ties everything in because people were wondering, when Legends Arceus was added to Pokemon Home, it's like, how do you bring them into newer games? It doesn't make any sense. Scarlet and Violet could be that game, the
Yeah.
game that links the Legends Arceus and that the past universe into this one. And I mean,
It's the
with all
missing
this
link.
dimension stuff going on, yeah, it really is the
This
missing
game
link.
could
Yeah.
tie it all together, and like I think that's what has me not too bothered about the leaks. Like on one hand, yeah, like it would have been so cool just to come upon this in a trailer, but there are so many implications for it and so much context that we need that even knowing like, oh, there's conversion Pokemon, like we don't really know everything, and we will need the trailers, we will need the game. So I don't feel like it's been totally ruined for me. I feel like, hey, there's still a lot of excitement because I'm being tantalized with mechanics almost, right? I'm being teased with like,
Mhm.
if they told you what if Mario had a triple jump, you wouldn't be like, oh, the game's ruined. It's like, well, where does he triple jump? Why does he triple jump? And I feel like that's kind of the
Hmm.
the idea here is like, okay, there's these convergent species, and I feel like at least from what I've seen, some of the reaction has been negative, saying like, oh, this isn't going to be very good. This game is going to be lame.
Hmm.
But I think it's because on the surface, these gimmicks are not as like easily described as like mega evolutions or dynamax, and you can't just say the Pokemon gets huge. There's more nuance, there's more context, and I think it'll become clear once we actually see it what's all there, and that's why I don't feel like the leaks are too damaging to our overall
Hmm.
hype for the game, because I think there's just a lot more to really get from this than just, oh,
Yeah.
there's fake Pokemon, oh, there's future forms, there's past forms. Like how that all works out and ties in and plays together is where it's really at.
Yeah, I think it's just the idea of people being like, I don't get it, so it's stupid, right? Like that's
Mm-hmm.
kind of The we see that so often with people where it's just like it seems alien to me. You have ruined the series that I love. When
Yeah.
really, I think the way you should look at it is, well, what direction does this bring us in, right? Like again, as we said, the implications of having futuristic Pokemon, prehistoric Pokemon, and then differing species is something that like genuinely, I think Pokemon is about the creatures, right? That's the whole idea. So being able to throw this wrench in the system of that we've known for so long, there's no way to not be somewhat excited about it. I think that's kind of the whole sentiment of the game, and we've been saying this since day one of the podcast. Is no matter what this game turns out to be, it has permanently changed Pokemon as we know it, and it just every week we do the podcast, it almost seems like we're going even further in that
Mm-hmm.
direction of like there's no going back. Whatever this is, like we have something on our hands that is truly unique to the Pokemon universe, and something that like is not only bringing multiple ideas to the table, but in a way kind of streamlining the universe, right? Like
Yeah.
in the new canon now, we now know that Pokemon have evolved over time, and there has been mention that like Pokemon were more animalistic, in the past. But again, with Legends Arceus, it kind of seemed like they didn't want to really show that. They didn't
Mm.
want to show prehistoric versions of every Pokemon.
You don't want
They
to see
wanted to
what they
show
used to do, what they used to be like. It's
exactly. But now
don't we
it
don't
seems like they're like, you know what? Let's show Oopsalotl
release the
and
footage. Release it.
release them.
Correct me if I'm wrong here, but I almost wonder if Game Freak was thinking, okay, people love shiny hunting. They love shinies. What if we found another way to kind of have a shiny where, and I don't know the rarity of these, but what if, eel form Diglett is kind of a rare one, and so you think you found a Diglett, and then, oh my gosh, it's actually the eel form, and so it kind of functions as like a bit of a cool catch, especially since this is multiplayer, especially since this is open
Hmm.
world. Another way that's not as difficult, rare, or as time consuming as shinies to have you and your friends come upon something that maybe is exciting, new, nuanced, different. I could see that being the motivation, or at least one of the motivations.
Yeah, I mean, I think the big thing that people need to remember is this game is open world. This game is clearly going in a direction that Pokemon was probably originally set to go in, but due to hardware and just not being able to really match that vision, we're finally seeing a Pokemon game that is going to, kind of match what we see in the anime, match what we've seen or what we imagine the Pokemon world being like, right? So I think if they handle it that way, where the R fakes are rarer than say their kind of more common counterparts, that could only strengthen the game, in
Mm,
my opinion. Because again, it is multiplayer. You're not going to be grinding alone, and I think that joy of finding something that like is and again, they don't have to be as hard to find as shinies, but I saw a tweet from Ku that said one of the R fates is going to uh, it exists in the water but crawls to the land, and I think that that's going to be the Diglett because I think that makes kind of the most sense.
hmm
Is that it's this group of eels that finds its way onto land. How cool would it be if you had to do something to kind of get that interaction, right? We've
Yeah.
seen in Pokemon Snap kind of setting up things to make Pokemon come out, right? That would be really cool if like, okay, you have to find this eel Diglett's favorite berry, I don't know, and it
Yeah.
exists on one side of the map, and then you have to go to the beach and place it and wait, and then it comes, like stuff like that makes it a living, breathing world and also gives it something to like it gives you something to do. It may seem like, oh, I just want to walk into the grass and find a Pokemon. But at the end of the day, that makes a good Pokemon game, but not a good game, right?
Mm,
Like at the end of the day, what Pokemon needs to do is make like great engaging games, not good Pokemon games, right? Because they're good at that. We know every Pokemon game that comes out is going to be an easy 7.5 out of 10
mm,
across the board, right? But like I want to see a game that really shines and makes people look at the franchise and go, you know what, this isn't just the same thing over and over again. And I mean, that's kind of like what we're seeing. We're finally seeing the Pokemon Company and Game Freak really throw ideas that again change the implications of like what Pokemon is. And I think it's just so exciting no matter how you look at it.
It would be a harmonious way to sort of tie in the advancements of Legends Arceus, but also make it mainline. The thing you're kind of describing, if there were some more questy type ways of luring Pokemon or changing environments or things of that sort, because we know you're not going to be able to just throw Pokeballs willy nilly. But we have a leak that supposedly you can control the camera in battle, which is nice. And so if you could do something like this, that would be kind of, I think, a really great middle ground. And I think that's probably where this game ends up falling, right? Like, how do we mainline Arceus while still making it feel mainline? And I think it seems like they're finally ready to be a little bolder and not be like, well, this is we can't do that. It feels like maybe this is the one that they really kind of go out on a limb in the evolutionary tree and in the gameplay tree. I want to move a little bit to the prehistoric and the futuristic forms, and I'm going to bring up a list that we can reference here that kind of shows what we supposedly know so far. So this is the list that we have of the regional species, the ancient species, and there is now a future species as well. Let me find that. I'll show this to you. But first point about this is apparently there's only 2 regional forms for this region, which I mean, they're doing all sorts of forms, but that is strange.
Yeah, I think I, so. I think initially off seeing that there were only 2, it is a little weird, especially because coming off of Alola and the Galar region, which had really at least a little more. But I think again, it's going to really make up for it in terms of the ancient and futuristic versions, as well as the our fates. But one thing to note about the regional forms as well is, we have seen similar things to it before. You look at Meowth, who is to date probably the person with the most regional forms. He has his Cantonian form, he has his Alolan form, and then he has his Galarian form. We saw again another interesting precedent done with Meowth is that his Galarian form evolves into Berserker, which is a complete different Pokemon from, say, what's its name? I can't even think of the original
Persian
evolution, Persian, and then Alolan Persian, of course. But I would still count Berserker as a regional form, if that makes sense, right?
Okay.
Because like it needs to be Galarian Meowth to become it.
Right.
So like for instance, the reason I say it is like we only have Wooper and Tauros, but thanks to those evolutions, the Wooper, the Murkrow, the Dunsparce, and Giraffariid,
they're effectively regional.
They're effectively regional, right?
Yeah.
Like that's kind of the idea. But again, it does also kind of make you understand where their designs are going to lie. Wooper and Wooper's new evolution may not be Quagsire at all. It actually is said not even to be Quagsire. We are going to get an original evolution. That makes sense. It's a regional form. Tauros, it doesn't look like has an evolution, so that'll just be regional. What's interesting is when you have Murkrow, Dunsparce, and Giraffariid, they're not region specific, right? So this is going to be a Johto Giraffariid evolving, which makes sense when we see the leak for Giraffariid because it looks like a Giraffariid evolution. It doesn't look like a different Giraffariid, right?
Yeah.
So I think that gives us a good idea of Dunsparce and Murkrow. It's going to have probably the same design philosophy as the original Pokemon, just reimagined. So similar to Alolan Persian as opposed to Berserker, right? Like I think that's kind of the way to go about it. Again, where it gets really interesting is the fates, the convergent species and the ancient species. That's kind of where things get a little. I don't even know.
And the future species, like how, like it's pretty easy to make Jigglypuff or whoever look ancient. You throw some fangs on them or you throw some spears. What do you think they're going to do for future? Like how is Delibird going to be futuristic? Is it because at first, we had talked about, okay, it's going to be like, all like metal and body
Mhm.
modifications and all that. But can you see a different way where maybe it's more of a naturalistic future, like more of like, oh, this is like sort of the ultimate form of this?
Given okay, so that's actually really interesting, and um, it makes me want to kind of circle back to a conversation like that conversation in particular that we had was the idea that the ancient Pokemon and the future Pokemon are uh, more, I guess, more comically represented, right? Like I imagined like a mod camp in like gladiator
Right.
attire, right?
Right.
And then if it's a future one, he only has two real arms and then the other arms are mechanic, right? Like that's kind of where the head goes.
Mm-hmm.
But now that we know of the convergent species, what are the chances that in ancient and actually there's even more pointing that this is the case. What if their ancient species looks more like a regular animal, like looks closer to something that we know. And we've already seen kind of a leak of Amoonguss and Jigglypuff. Jigglypuff looks very similar. Like
Yes.
literally, it's just like a different eye color, essentially, what we saw. Um, so what if the way they're handling this is the natural evolution, right? So this isn't a new. So Delibird, for instance, is a future species that we see. The fact that they say species, I think, is the dead ringer here for where their heads at. I don't think it's a genetically altered Delibird from us. I don't think it's that we made this thing a
Yeah.
robot. I think this is years of evolution, like the regular one, the convergent species evolution that we're
Yeah.
seeing being brought into our timeline, which will give us a better understanding of where these Pokemon kind of exists, because now we'll know that, like, hey, in 1,000 years we might not even have a Bulbasaur. It might
Oh,
become something different. So again, like it is a really, the concept is so highbrow for a Pokemon game that genuinely it's like I don't know. I can't even imagine making Delibird better. It's literally Santa Claus.
yeah. So my thought was like, okay, you take Charmander, and let's say that ancient Charmander has no fire tail, right? He didn't evolve naturally. He was like, I'm just this little guy, and I'm surviving, and then evolution, natural selection. Well, I need this fire tail to survive, and then the future Charmander would have like fire tail and fire fists because that flaming fist and a flame tail because that was how he survived, and so I do
Mhm.
wonder if you're going to see minute changes as opposed to some dramatically new form. And on one hand, yeah, boo hiss, that's taking up a whole Pokedex slot. But on the other hand, like, it's kind of nifty that they would go back and say, it's been, 25 years. What's
Mhm.
Charmander up to 25 years later? What's Delibird up to, 20, like that kind of,
Exactly.
I can see some really hardcore fans being bothered and annoyed and thinking it's dumb. But I can also see it being a chance and a way to take this franchise, the Pokedex forward and show that like, hey, it's not always going to be the same. It's not always going to
Mhm.
be till the end of time Pikachu and Charmander and Bulbasaur and Squirtle and they do the same thing and they look the same way. Like at some point, Pokemon, I feel like Pokemon is so much about the concept and the idea than it is necessarily the Pokemon. And maybe that's like a horrible take, but
Mhm.
they always wanted to be someone's first Pokemon game, and I think this
Yeah.
sort of fits that more than keeping it exactly the same rote repeat. And I would be really excited to see like what is a Machamp or a Charmander or a Delibird look like if like in the future, like what would they be like if it didn't Pokemon didn't come out in the 90s? What if Pokemon came out in the 2050s? This is what they would have
Yeah.
been like.
I mean, it's a thing that what's funny is like, number one, you're absolutely correct. I don't think um, that Pokemon is just carried by the Pokemon themselves. I make that pretty clear the way I feel about it. I think it's just everything together. Everything comes together to create this world that people just enjoy to be in, right? Which is why my stance on this is any addition is good.
Hmm.
Okay, like I wasn't a big fan of like Gigantamax or not Dynamaxing. I was a huge fan of Gigantamaxing.
Mm,
That was way cooler. But Dynamaxing, for instance, didn't really do it for me. But it was an addition to the game. You know what I mean? So I
right.
couldn't be mad about it. Same thing with Megas. Although obviously Megas are just really cool. Um, it doesn't change what came before. You know, so for people to be upset about it, that's just the Pokemon franchise. You
Yeah.
know, that's just how that is. But one thing I will say is we have seen the sentiment done before of like, have you ever seen people do, well, what if Gen 1 Pokemon were made in Gen 5? And they kind
Yeah.
of go with the new design logic where like, in the original Pokemon, they looked like just regular animals. There were no really, aside from Blastoise having cannons on its back, they were things that you could genuinely be like, I can see that,
Right.
like obviously not in our world, but in a world, it made sense
Yeah.
that these things exist. Whereas once we started hitting like generation 4, 5, 6, we started seeing things like Klefki, which is a literal key.
Yeah.
So the design logic has changed throughout the years. I think it would make a lot of sense to say, well, hey, maybe Charizard is an older species than say Klefki. Maybe Klefki is, something that has gained sentience recently. Like
Yeah.
it's obviously been a Pokemon for a while, but what if it's a thing? Those Pokemon took over a key. Now we just created a brand new Pokemon, right? Because it is that easy, essentially. So the idea that Pokemon in the past were more simple, closer to what we know them as, and they've evolved over time to become more, you know, more battle ready, more I guess complex in their biology.
Yeah.
I think it makes sense that it would continue to go that way. And as you said, I can see a Charizard with more with fire claws and more aggressive because again like we've made it into something that battles.
Right.
Years of battling is gonna change a species. So again, I think it's just an interesting concept. And it also, the Pokemon company is making a hard stance here. It's saying Pokemon evolution comes in two ways. It comes in the evolution as we know it, which are these big kind of jumps in I guess biology, where again you could see a Charmander become a Charizard just leveling it up.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but now they've introduced like, hey, yeah, there is long-term evolution. There are long-term effects to these Pokemon being uh, changed over time. And we kind
Right.
of, I mean, that's kind of what regional forms were in a sense, but they were changed by, geography. Now we're seeing something changed by literal time, which is like, I think it's cool. I think it fits right in, honestly.
Yeah. So we have the fakes, which I assume that's all the Detroit Become Human stuff we discussed. I assume that's all the clone robot. It's not actual robots, but I assume it's. I mean, unless it's still uh, human characters that are clones. I feel like. Do you think? Do you think that's what, or do you think it's separate?
Mm, I don't know. And I genuinely can't tell. I don't know if it falls into like the same categories. It's really that I think again, like just to reiterate, I think this is why like I don't care that the leaks are happening
Yeah.
because there are still so many questions. There,
Right.
if anything, again, there's more questions. We're like deeper in where it's like hey, we haven't even talked about the crystallization, which
Yeah.
is now a whole other like this goes deep enough. This could have been the gimmick enough to the game, and again,
Right.
it fits with the time thing. So like the fact that now we have like a battle one too, it's just it's very it's odd, it's exciting, but man, it's
Let
confusing.
Let's go to the crystallization. So supposedly Nimona gives you a special ball that can be used once per battle. You throw it out, and it effectively gives the Pokemon the crystal aura that we saw from that like flower skull thing. And this allows them to boost a type. Now, I don't think it's type changing, right? It's more just boosting an already existing type. And then it would be when that Pokemon is knocked out or called back, it sort of just lasts for the length of its battle, if its life.
Mhm.
run me through this. I'm not really understanding the full implications here. So, like, if you boosted the electric type, then that Pokemon's electric moves would be stronger for that battle?
Okay, so basically, to sum it up, this is a very competitive forward battle game.
Okay.
The idea is, when fighting in Pokemon, obviously type advantage is important. However, let's say you're using, I don't know, you're using like a water Pokemon. You're using a Blastoise. We'll go with that, right? And I'm using a Snorlax, and I use Thunder Fist or Thunder Punch, right? Snorlax can learn Thunder Punch. Crazy move. Why can it learn it? It's a normal type. It is super effective, but it won't do as much damage as if it was a Pikachu using it,
Hmm.
because there's something known as stab, which is same type advantage, it's same type attack boost essentially, which is like if my electric Pokemon uses an electric move, it actually has a multiplier on the damage. It'll do more damage because that's its type.
Yeah.
So for Snorlax, I would have to use a normal move for it to basically do stab damage. What this crystallization is essentially sounding to be is that it's not that you change the type of your Pokemon, but now if I have Snorlax, I can use this Thunder crystallization on my move to basically make it do as much damage as if it was a stab,
Hmm.
right?
Yeah.
And so I think that's the idea is your typing stays the same, but you're now boosted in terms of attack. Um, I did see that it also boosts probably defense in a way as well. Like you will be a stronger Pokemon in general using it, right? Like
Yeah.
that's kind of the idea of it. Is once you use it, you're going to be stronger. But again, I think the stab mechanic is
The
really the
focus.
importance here. Is
Yeah.
is the being able to actually do real full damage on a Pokemon based off of the type of move rather than just the type of the Pokemon.
So how do you see this being selected? Because I can't imagine there's a menu of like pick a type. Like, so is it you pick the
Mhm.
move? It just boosts. What do you think this is going to look like? You throw the ball out, the crystallization begins to appear. What are you choosing? What's your theory?
I guess it kind of depends, right? It depends on kind of where they draw the line, because I can also see them very much. I don't want to see it this way, but I can see it be done as Z crystals, right? The way we kind of had that. Um, so, like, let's say you beat the fire gym, you get the fire crystal that you would
Mm,
attach to your
yeah.
Pokemon that now you can at any point activate and then use, right? And then since there are, however many types, 18, I believe, there may be trainers, like 18 trainers representing a type that you have to beat to essentially get, this crystal to use. Um, that's one way I see it. I don't know, because then the funny thing about that is now that takes out the hold item for the Pokemon. So it'll be equivalent to Mega Evolution in that sense, because the whole thing with like with Pokemon battling is you're allowed one item to hold.
Right.
The idea of megas where they're so OP that you shouldn't be able to have an item and a mega. So it made sense. But this crystallization does seem strong. It doesn't seem as strong as say mega evolution, right?
Yeah.
Again, that's just me guessing out there. I don't know anything about it. I can't really use it. I can't make
Right.
an educated guess because we know literally nothing. Um, so I don't know, but I imagine that whatever it is, it's not Game Freak. I
Yeah.
trust Game Freak, and as much trouble as I give them, I trust them enough to make a game that's not inherently broken, especially not with the mechanic that essentially is most important in a Pokemon game, that being the battles.
Yeah. I guess it could also be just like an overall going off of sort of the stab thing. Like whatever you use is just now given that property. Like maybe there is no selection. Maybe it's just like, oh, if Snorlax uses a, do you know what I mean? I don't know. We'll have to wait and see. But we basically have the three gimmicks now, which is the R
Mhm.
fake slash convergent species, the ancient slash future forms, or the prime prehistoric forms, and then we have this crystallization boosting of the single type. Now, the other point, I guess, about the crystallization that I did not mention is that apparently there is an additional flourish. Like according to the leak, that skull that we saw in that flower is like part of the crystallization. So like you are gonna have some visual aid to show like
Mhm.
okay the poison is boosted or whatever it is.
Yeah.
This those being the three gimmicks. What's your review of Scarlet and Violet? 4 months out, if these are the gimmicks.
Um, yeah, I mean, I guess like I'll I'll kind of I have to preface it with kind of like what I even feel about the gimmicks in general,
Yeah.
because I think it's kind of become a precedent now of Pokemon games that when a new one is coming out, what's the gimmick?
Okay.
And I think that narrative kind of creates this like dissonance in the franchise where people feel that they're running out of ideas, um, which is an interesting takeaway from it because it effectively is the exact opposite, right?
Mm,
It's the fact that we don't want to run out of ideas. It's the we're going to keep trying to kind of you know evolve the franchise in a way. And I think depending on how you feel about that, you'll kind of get different things. And with that being said, as I mentioned before, some gimmicks and for me, some don't. Z crystals didn't really do much for me. I didn't see too much sense in having them. Um, Whereas megas were very cool and very like interwoven with the lore to the point where it basically created the two separate timelines in Pokemon right there. So, I think in a sense they can be used for really good reasons. I say this because I think this is going to be extremely story heavy
yeah.
in terms of what we're going to see. I don't think the crystals are going to be necessarily story involved. I think that's just the region's gimmick.
Yeah.
So that's the Mega Evolution, that's the Dynamax, that's the Z Crystals. This new form is going to be that gimmick. Um, the Convergent species, I don't like. Obviously, we say it's a gimmick. I don't see it as a gimmick as much as I see it as a way of deepening the world of Pokemon. Right?
Right.
It's making it more rich. It's making it more I guess conceptually stronger because now we're seeing like anytime a game franchise goes further into its world building, it creates a better picture for that world, right?
Yeah.
And I think that that's what this is doing. It's creating an ecosystem now that feels more real. Um, you know, I guess it kind of sucks not seeing your favorite Pokemon come back or be left out for the forms, but again, I think that's what makes it feel more real. Is like, who would have thought Wooper would have gotten a poison regional form for this gen?
Yeah.
That's awesome. I love Quagsire. I love Wooper. He's such a derpy little Pokemon. I'm looking forward to seeing its new evolution. So where I stand with these gimmicks is essentially as long as the game is good, I'm excited, right?
Yeah.
And I think that's really the way to look at it is if I enjoyed playing Pokemon Red and Blue, which was a fun game at the time, it was my favorite game. I used to play Blue constantly. Um, I can't imagine I won't like this. This is literally that, but better, deeper, richer. Just hopefully it works and isn't a mess.
Yeah.
That's more so what I'm worried about. Because conceptually it sounds good, but what about you? Like, do you think they're doing too much with this, or?
When you said Pokemon Blue, I just had this like memory stabbing in the back of my head. I'm 4.5 years older than my middle brother, and I had red, he had blue. And after we'd played the heck out of them, I convinced him one time to trade this other kid Pokemon Blue, and in return he got Super Mario Bros. Deluxe, Mickey Mouse Racing, and Pokemon Pinball. And I thought that was a really good trade, but he regretted the trade, and I just want to know, did I do him dirty?
Um, I don't think you did them dirty. I think those are good games. I've played all three. So you just gave me a nice little blast to the past. Pokemon Pinball would actually go to be one of my favorite games when it got its advanced
Right?
iteration. That game is genuinely fantastic for anybody who hasn't played. But even the original was really, really good. Like the boards were cool. It looked awesome for a Game Boy game. I think it's just Pokemon. It's so weird to me, and I don't know if you feel similar about this, but like I have trouble playing going back and playing original RPGs, right? I wanted to do like where I would go back and play like Dragon Quest, for instance,
Mm,
because like I know how much it means to the franchise, to not to the franchise, to gaming as an RPG, but also like I loved 11 so much that I was like, let me see the roots of it, right? For some reason, a game like that, or even the older Final Fantasies, to me personally, doesn't hold up as much as the original Pokemon game, which is crazy
mm,
because the original Pokemon game was held together by duct tape and dreams, really. It is not a well crafted game, but it is an incredible one. And I think
mm.
that's like maybe that's why people have this connotation with Game Freak that like they have to be better because people just assume that they were always good from the start. But like you look at that first game, it was programmed so poorly. Like typings didn't match up right. Like some moves wouldn't even do what they said they did. Like it was kind of a mess, but the game itself was such an adventure. Like it really made you feel like you're going and you're going town to town and you're meeting these people and everything was just so I don't know, the world building was just so incredible. And I think maybe that's why your brother felt like he lost it in
It
the
was
trade
three for
because while
one.
he did get great games,
Yeah.
while he got great games, I feel like the experience of what Pokemon is trumps that. I
Okay.
can go back and play Red and Blue now, and I can beat that game. Like I will sit through that game.
All
I
right.
genuinely think it holds up, but I don't know. I think I think it was a good trade. I don't think you should feel too bad
Okay.
about
Phew.
it.
I was gonna say emotional trauma unresolved, but thank you for that final answer. So basically, I have two ways of looking at this. One way, which I think is going to be the most common way of looking at this off the trailer, is that it's weak gimmick, good game. I think that's one takeaway
Yeah.
here. Weak gimmick, good game. These prehistoric forms and future forms are exciting. Koraidon and Miraidon are great. The whatever. But the way that I choose to look at this is that the gimmick is, and we've said this before, the gimmick is multiplayer open world, and this crystallization just
Mhm.
is like a bonus thrown in. So if you view it that way, well, this is one of the greatest, if not the greatest, gimmicks ever. Because if I told you, you can have Z crystals, or you can have 4-player co-op, you can have Dynamaxing, or you can have a giant open seamless world with, I think you'd pick that every single time. So I'm going to
Mhm.
choose to look at this like the crystallization ball is just a thrown in extra, and we have this really fleshed out world. We have an open world, we have a great story, hopefully, and we have multiplayer, and that's sort of where Scarlet and Violet distinguishes itself, not based on stab boosting, but instead based on the multiplayer and instead based on the open world. And as long as those are
Mhm.
rich, then hey, we have maybe the greatest gimmick ever.
Yeah. I think people are thinking it's going to be the most intense game because of how much is leaking. I think they think it's going to be confusing. I think
Mm-hmm.
they think it's going to be maybe too much. But at the end of the day, I think you're absolutely right. I don't see these regional forms and convergent species as gimmicks as much as I see them as new Pokemon that I get to experience and
Yeah.
be excited when I see. At the end of the day, it's an open world co-op game. Um, More Pokemon is only a plus, especially if we're seeing Pokemon that we loved as children reimagined. It's a win-win. There's no, it's not changing the Pokemon that we loved. It's adding kind of new additions to it. Like seeing a Primate evolution is going to be sick, and I can't even, I can't even imagine what that's going to look like. It's going to be cool though. I know that. So yeah, I mean, with that being said, it's like open world Pokemon game. This is what it was supposed to be. This is what it was always supposed to be. It was what it was leading to. And I think Legends Arceus gave everyone kind of a taste of that, while not making a main series game, which is why some people were turned off.
Right.
But I really do think everything's coming together to make a game that's like really what Pokemon was imagined to be. Go on an adventure, go town to town, meet people, meet Pokemon, build your team, and have a precious journey. Right? That's what Pokemon was always meant to be, and it finally is that. There is one problem I do have, and I hate it. Apparently, there's no customization in clothes like
Yeah.
the way it was. It's like school uniforms. I am so upset about that. So
And this seems like the game where you'd want the most customization. We talked about like, man, they have to have the most customization. I do
yeah,
wonder, there's no indication of this, but my mind goes to, okay, if this is DLC, if this is going to be supported, if this is, open world, maybe they supply that via DLC and microtransactions. I mean, I don't know that they would. Unlikely on the microtransactions, but DLC, I could see that being part of some sort of expansion pass. We just had the Xenoblade Chronicles 3 one come out, and there's like a story pack, there's like a character pack, and then there's like clothing
yeah.
pack. So maybe they find a way to do it that way. They bring in outfits, but it does just seem super odd that with an open world multiplayer game, you'd think you'd want the most customization. So there are some odd choices. We have leaked that there's no fishing, no bikes. Obviously, there's motorcycles.
Yeah.
Another one that I want to point out here that we can kind of just touch on is, what do you think about this auction system? They're talking about some auction house with NPCs. Have you seen this one?
I haven't. No. What's
So,
the idea
so
behind that?
supposedly there's an auction system, an auction house with NPCs and items. I
Oh,
Yeah, I don't even really know how that factors in. Let me see if I can pull up some more detail here. Um, in the meantime, you can tell me what you think about no fishing, because I saw some people were very bothred by
fishing's
that.
weird, dude. I mean, I was excited that fishing was in Kirby. What are
Yeah,
we doing? Why are we taking steps back? I don't
yeah,
understand. Fishing mini games is like the meme now, and Pokemon's been doing it since day one. What is up with that?
yeah.
I don't understand the 3 steps forward, 4 steps back thing. But yeah, between that and the outfits, I mean, one thing I will say about the outfits though that is interesting is they said it's all going to be like school uniforms. Does that have to do with the jobs, the potential
Mm,
job thing that was discussed? Like, do we get the uniform by going to the school and whatever? Like maybe different schools in different towns will give you different um, like quests, and if you do those quests you get certain rewards, and so it's kind
yeah.
of like an alliance system in a way, which
Hmm,
would be cool because if it's me and let's say me and you are playing, it would be cool to see us go to different towns to go to different schools.
yeah.
Obviously we get the outfits from whatever that is, but then we also have there's stuff we could talk about where it's like, oh well, what mission did you do to receive that, and then I think things like that are really what's going to make the world feel more lived in. And I guess that's another reason why the fishing mini game, your old fishing being taken out, does kind of suck. Because at the end of the day, it's like that feature was already implemented in essentially every game except for Legends Arceus.
Right.
So like to me,
Why?
that's the Pokemon company, right? The removal of a thing that was already implemented, that's where it gets upsetting. I don't care about adding new things, but it's the removing of old things that worked is
Right.
like the what's up with that. But
So
yeah, no fishing.
here's the details I have for you. So it says there's a new auction house where you can buy but not sell items, and you participate with other NPCs. I mean that it's very nebulous of what that could be, but I also want to touch on. Apparently, you can catch and battle while riding the motorcycle legendaries. So no clue how that factors in. And they also say you can climb, swim, and fly with them.
Okay, so uh, that's weird because I did see that the leak of them having 5 forms
Hmm.
was apparently debunked.
Right.
Um, if they had 5 forms, that would make sense, right? It would kind of fill in that gap for Legends Arceus, where it was like you had to switch from different mons.
Right. You just need
Like,
one. Yeah.
you know, for this, you would need one exactly. And I'd imagine, like, if I'm driving towards a cliff, maybe he transforms and then I climb up the cliff with him. But I don't know. That's that. I mean, as far as gameplay wise, that'd be awesome, right? It's a nice, like, streamlined way of traveling, which you could never, ever, ever complain about, especially in an open world game. But visually, I have no idea what that looks like. Does he
And
transform, or are you just like riding up a mountain?
yeah. And you're battling on the bike. You stay on the. Or do you think it just means you can like hit battles while riding?
Yeah, I'm
Okay.
sure. I don't know, right? Like,
Isn't that weird?
what? I guess what's really throwing me off is the battling, because now that we know that the camera's controlled, why was it an auto camera in the trailer? It just doesn't make sense. And it's sounding like if you're saying I could battle on the bike, it's sounding like I could do the Legends Arceus thing, throw the Pokeball
Right?
while on the bike, and then it starts battling. If it's just I can run into a Pokemon while on the bike, we were always able to do that. That doesn't really feel like a feature. That's how most people run into battles, is they're on the bike and they're going through the grass and
Right.
whatever. So it's a weird thing to like point that out. I do wonder if it is a unique thing. Like, is it or maybe they mean you battle on the bike. Maybe we're getting some like Yu-Gi-Oh 5Ds,
Bike battles,
like bike
baby.
battles. Like the gym battles are happening while both of you are riding your bike.
The other part, the other part that I don't get with it is if there's no bike and it's Koraidon and Miraidon, you have to acquire them earlier in the game than normal, right? Like that,
Mhm.
like that would have to be an earlier legendary encounter than what we're used to.
I feel like they may do the Pokemon Sun and Moon thing where you get Nebby, which is like the Cosmog,
Oh yeah, yeah.
that little baby Pokemon,
Mm-hmm.
that eventually becomes the legendary, right? But
Mm,
you do have it, like you see it early on. You don't really receive it, but in this case, it might be. I mean, think about it. We even have, the screenshot of, what's her name, Nimona saying, "Are these three yours?" Right? Like, are these three Pokemon yours? So what if it's not the three starters, but what if it's your starter, Pterodon or Miraidon, and then another Pokemon that potentially you could have? Like, what if that is the case, that we are given this thing early on? It's just not its true form. It's not the
it's a
bots
bike,
legendaries
and
that we
then
see.
later the bike wakes up and turns into a Pokemon.
What if, right? I mean,
Yeah.
but then that would also be like, so do our bites look different from the start? Because I'm going to be getting, the other game, I'm
Right.
getting Violet and you Scarlet. Like, are we going to have different bikes, or do they save that for the, ending, the big reveal that,
Yeah.
you know, so it's just interesting. And I do wonder how it ties in again into the story, because there clearly is a heavy narrative on past versus future. We're seeing that in every way. That is certainly what it is. I know there was that brief time where, last week we were like, maybe it's nature versus, like you said, nurture, where it's like we augmented these Pokemon, but
Right.
it does seem they are going the genuine, like, this is how they will look in the future, this is how they will look before.
Yeah.
So maybe there's not as much human interaction as we thought, which makes a lot more sense, because it made it seem like Violet was definitely the evil villain,
Yeah.
right? Like,
Yeah.
like I'm okay with you turning Delibird into a mechanical
Cyborg.
cyborg. I am
Yeah.
cool with that. Put lasers on him, make him a Digimon, right? And that just seems like a weird stance to have, just because I like the color violet,
Yeah.
So I do think that, like, whatever it is, with Koraidon and Miraidon, we probably will have them early on. Um, but whatever ends up happening with them, story related, won't be revealed until,
That makes
before
sense.
you fight the eighth gem, like usual.
When will the trailer be revealed? I guess that's kind of what we can wrap up on. There is a new page on the Japanese Pokemon website domain, and currently you can't access it, but it does say 8/4 on the bottom, like August 4th. And people are
Mhm.
unsure if that is the pre-order date, if that is the next trailer date, if that is just a website date. That's still a solid 3 weeks away. It feels like a heck of a long wait because we started having these leaks, what, 2 weeks ago now? And
Yeah.
so that would be like 5 weeks of all this stuff with no like official confirmation, no official reveal. At this point, though, I don't know. Last week was supposed to be like this big reveal week. We didn't get anything for Pokemon nor Mario Kart.
Mhm.
I don't even have a prediction at this point. It could be August 4th. It could be next Wednesday.
Yeah.
I don't know what they're doing.
I'm hoping this is just a Nintendo stepping in type of deal. I know that, like, um obviously Game Freak doesn't really care too much about Nintendo's practices, as they really do kind of run their own show.
Yeah.
But I'd like to imagine that the announcement of the new Kirby game and Bayonetta 3 was kind of prioritized, right? Because Kirby's coming out this summer,
Mm-hmm.
Pokemon is not. And then Bayonetta 3 is a game that, you know, them even just dropping it the way they did, I think did so much for the game just because it shocked everyone, excited everyone. So I'm hoping that Pokemon just wasn't done then due to them not wanting to overshadow the other two things. Because genuinely, like, the thing that you have to remember is Pokemon is the biggest franchise in the world,
Yeah.
right? You do not want to show not only the biggest franchise in the world, but probably the biggest franchise in the world with the most changes to their game the same week you're showing two other things that you have to start getting into people's minds now. So I'm hoping that it was more of a tactical decision to hold it back because that would make sense, right? The leaks coming last week could be because we are gearing up to get that trailer really soon, but last week just was not good timing. So that's kind of what I'm hoping. If it is August 3rd, I think, man, if it's in August at all, really, it's a little upsetting that we won't get to see the game. But we all know everything about the game anyway, so does it really affect much? I don't.
I still want to
Um,
see it. I still want to. Yeah, I still want
yeah,
to find out what I. If I had to guess, I feel like it will be August at this point. The only reason I say that I don't have any information, it's just because Nintendo is publishing 2 games the next 2 weeks, and if they do, I
mhm,
know they operate independently, but if they're trying to really space stuff out, then it would make the most sense to just give everything its own kind of week. Um,
exactly.
but either way, I am super excited. I think every time I find out more information about these games, I think they sound better and better. I think they sound more and more interesting. And I think this whole convergent species thing sounds like one of the coolest moves Pokemon has made. And I hope it does flesh out as much as we're thinking it'll flesh out. I hope it's not just like, oh, this one looks like Diglett, but it's different. I hope there is like lore implications, species implications, evolutionary
Yeah,
implications. But yeah, who knows what next week will hold? Last week we thought like, oh, we have it all figured out, and now it's, or rather, we thought we had none of it figured out, and now we have it all figured out. So who knows where we'll be next week? Remember, leave that review on iTunes. It's your last week chance. Next podcast will be announcing the winner of the thing that's more important than the dinner, the Lechonk Pokemon cartridges. And thank you so much for watching. Thanks so much for listening. Thanks so much for spending some time with us. There's so many more leaks, so if nothing else, we have that to talk about next week, and we'll be back on Sunday with another episode of Scarlet Fever. Now that everyone is just sick with it, just full on sick with it. Thanks so much for
literally.
joining.
Yeah.
Thanks, Joseph, for being here, and everybody stay safe, stay healthy, stay happy, stay positive. Have a great week, and until next time, SwitchForce out.